We're looking at how to write time kanji in this video tutorial, and we're going to start with the kanji over here, which means o'clock. Let's have a look at its elements and stroke order. The left-hand side over here is very clearly identifiable as a squashed up sun. Down on the left, across and down on the right without taking your pen off the page. Fill in the middle and close off the bottom, and that you'll recognize as sun. Now this is a kanji to do with time, so it makes perfect sense that sun is going to be an important part of time. On the right hand side of sun, we've got an element here which means temple, and it's made up of two identifiable parts. The top one here, ichi, ni, san, that means a place, and it's derived from a pictograph of a plant growing out of the ground. The small stroke across here, that represents the two leaves growing, and then down the middle we've got the stalk, and across the bottom that's the ground or the earth. So you can see how this kanji over here could easily have been derived from this picture of a ground with a stalk and two leaves. Academics are in doubt as to the actual origin of this. Some people think that it was a picture which meant activity and that came from the growing of the tree, and other people think it's something quite different. But because it's exactly the same as the kanji which we now use for ground, let's just think of that top element as meaning ground. Now underneath the ground we've got an element which is derived from a picture of a hand, and it goes across here, down here, and then that little extra bit, it can mean a hand, and it also has come to mean measure. So if you've got a place where you've got hands doing clerical work, then that's a temple. Originally it was just a government building, but eventually most of the clerical stuff in ancient China was carried out by Buddhist monks, so a government building became a temple. So on the right hand side, on top, ich, ni, san, that's a place, and the bottom, ich, ni, san, that's a hand. So a place where handwork is carried out or clerical work. Now, of course, the sun and the temple, well, in the olden days, the temple was where all sorts of things were measured and studied. And one of the things that they probably measured was the passing of the sun every day across the sky, which is, in fact, how we measure time. So it's come to mean time, and more specifically, the way we're going to use it is to mean o'clock. It's pronounced ji. It goes after a number, and when you put it after a number, it means that number o'clock. Ji, o'clock. Next we have the character meaning half, and we can use this to say half past an hour, 6:30 and 7:30. Note that in Japanese the half goes after the o'clock, so instead of saying 7:30, you say 7 o'clock half, shichiji han. Let's have a look at the origin and stroke order of this kanji. It's a slightly gruesome one, I'm afraid. There were originally two parts to this kanji. The top part you can see here, and you can see in this character, and this character, and this character, and it meant split in two. So you can see those two halves. Down here you can see it clearly. It's been split in two. And then underneath we actually have an ancient pictograph of a cow. And this character, in fact, meant splitting a cow in two. And that went back to the days of sacrifice. In the olden times in ancient China, cows were split in order to make a religious sacrifice. And the two elements, the top bit here splitting in two and the cow underneath, came to mean half, splitting in two. Let's check out the kakijun. Now you can see in the modern day character, the two elements which we saw that looked like that have actually been inverted. So they now look like this, ich, ni. Underneath we have the head of the cow, so that's across there, that would be where his eyes go, underneath where his nose goes, and then down the middle of the cow's head. And that's very similar to the character that we even use today to mean cow. So there's the cow, and he's been split into two halves. And that's how we write hung. So stroke order is ichi, ni, san, shi, and go. hung. Here we can see how we would use this kanji to write 1:30. First we'd use the kanji for 1, ichi, then we'd add the kanji for o'clock, that's ji, and finally we'd put the kanji meaning half, that's hung, and we would get ichi ji hung, ichi ji hung, meaning 1:30. Finally, we're going to be learning the kanji for minute. Let's have a look at its origin and stroke order. Before we actually look at the character for minute, I want you to have a look at this character, which means a knife. This is 2,000 years old, and then going back even more, you can start to see here with the very primitive characters that are more than 3,000 years old, that does start to look just like a knife, doesn't it? So this is the character, which means knife or sword, and we're going to be using that in the character for minute. Now here's the actual character for minute, and we can see we've got those top two elements again, which mean to split in two. So we've got the top two split in two, and then underneath we have a knife. So clearly a knife has split something in two, and this kanji has the base meaning of to divide into bits. Now it also means, by extension, a minute, because a minute is basically what you get when you divide an hour up into little bits. Let's have a look at it in its modern form. First of all, we do the top two elements, which mean to divide or to split, and then underneath we draw our knife or sword. So it goes across and down all in one, and our second stroke is this here. It's very much like a katakana cut, isn't it? But it doesn't go all the way up here. So we've got divide on the top and a sword. Divide up, cut into little bits, or by extension, a minute. Now here we can see how minute would be used in the example of 1 o'clock and 5 minutes. In other words, 1:05. In Japanese, you use your 1, you add your o'clock, then you add 5 and minutes. You don't need past. That's it. 1時5分 1時5分 1:05, or we can also say 1:05.